Okay, so good evening, everybody who's joining us on this Buddhist Global Relief New Year's retreat. Originally, we were planning to hold a retreat over the New Year's weekend, but some of us had other engagements on that over the weekend. And so we decided to schedule the retreat. The most convenient dates were starting this evening and then through this Saturday and tomorrow, Sunday. And we'll be having three teachers on the retreat. Myself, my name is Bhikkhu Bodhi, and from Alexandria, Virginia, Aya Dhammadipa, who is a bhikkhuni, and from California, Reverend Jin Chuan, who it seems is not online now, but he'll be joining us tomorrow. Reverend Jin Chuan and his colleague, Reverend Jin Wei. They're coming from the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. Okay, so today's session, this is going to be the first time that I've ever done something like this, since it's the new year, and it seems that if we look at the calendar, really, every day is essentially the same as every other day. There's no point in the given calendar where you can say, well, let's say there's no point, there's no objective criterion built into nature that says this day is the new year and previous day is the old year. But still, it's a convention to designate certain days as the New Year day. And the day that's designated as New Year differs in different traditions. Like I've had feet in three traditions. So of course, being an American, growing up in the US, so I'm most familiar with the Western and now it's become the international criterion of the new year. But living in Sri Lanka for many years, we had the new year usually around April 13th, April 12th to 13th. The new year in Sri Lanka actually extends over several days. It's not just one day. And now living in a Chinese monastery for several years, we celebrate the new year, usually starting the new moon in the month of February and continuing for 2 weeks until the full moon of February. So in a way, the Western calendar has a rather impoverished conception of the new year, confining it just to one day, whereas more traditional cultures extend the new year period over several days or several weeks. But even though we designate one day as the new year, whenever the new year comes around, it seems to bring about a certain change in people's feelings, attitudes, relations with each other. It seems as though old hostilities, resentments, grudges fall away, and people become more open to others, more accepting of others, kinder to others, extending good wishes to others. And we also come to feel personally that the new year is a time when we are going to undergo a change in our own life. Sometimes this can come about through a kind of passive conception, almost a sort of fatalistic conception, an optimistic kind of fatalism, that just the arrival of a new year is going to dissolve all of the barriers and problems and difficulties that we had to face in the past year. And now our luck is going to change and everything is going to fulfill our hopes and aspirations and our wishes for ourselves individually and for the people close to us. So that's a kind of passive conception of the change that takes place at the new year. But there's also a more active way in which we conceive the arrival of the new year. And that is we use the new year as a time for deliberately, consciously turning over a new leaf in our life. It's a time when people make New Year's resolutions by which they determine that they're going to give up their bad habits, their bad practices and instead commit themselves to a more wholesome way of life, to develop good habits, good practices. And that's quite in accordance with, we call it the spirit of Buddhism, where we have like one of the paramis or paramitas is adhitthana parami, the perfection of resolution or determination, whereby one makes determinations to undertake certain practices or to work through certain difficulties. Okay, and people in traditional Buddhist cultures also look at the new year as a time to receive blessings. And this is an idea which maybe is not so widespread here amongst Western practitioners of Buddhism, but it plays an extremely important role in the lives of traditional Asian Buddhists. And that is that one sees the new year as a time to receive blessings, to open oneself to blessings, particularly to what I call the blessing power of the three jewels, the triple gem. And so on New Year's, people will go to the Buddhist temple or monastery in their neighborhood. They'll make dana or offerings to the monastics. They will worship the Buddha, and they will try to do other deeds of merit in order to obtain blessings to carry them through the new year. And this kind of practice involves certain qualities, which I have to say, frankly, are rather underrated and sometimes even neglected in contemporary Western Buddhism. These interrelated qualities I call faith, confidence, and devotion. That is, one arouses and strengthens one's faith in the ultimate objects of Buddhist faith, which are the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. One strengthens one's trust in the three jewels. That trust is what we call in Pali, we have the word pasada, which I translate as confidence. But usually the word in English, the word confidence suggests self-confidence. He's a confident man, which means that he can go in front of a group and speak or carry on business dealings without any kind of hesitation or self-doubt. But the word confidence, the word that I'm translating as confidence, pasada, suggests the clarity of mind, the tranquility of mind that comes when one finds objects of refuge in which one can place trust. And so when one encounters those objects of refuge and places trust in them, the mind settles down and becomes tranquil, peaceful, and light, luminous. So that is the sense of pasada, confidence, and devotion implies or suggests a feeling of reverence or veneration towards certain objects, certain entities that are considered the most precious, the most valuable, the loftiest entities, you could say, in the entire universe. These are the entities on which our spiritual development and ultimate spiritual fulfillment depends. And in the Buddhist tradition, of course, these ultimate objects of refuge, of devotion, of faith, and of confidence are the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And now I want to share a sutta with you, and then what we're going to do today, and I said this is the first time that I've ever done this, is to go through a sutta called the Ratana Sutta, the sutta on jewels, on gems, on several of the verses. We'll read them together, and then do short meditations on the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha mentioned in the verses. But before we come to that sutta, I want to take another sutta. Let me just see where I have it. Okay. Yeah, so this sutta is from the Anguttara Nikaya. It's the book of the fours, and the sutta is number 34, where the Buddha speaks about four foremost kinds of confidence. And so what are the four? So he goes through them one by one. So the first concerns living beings. So among all living beings, whatever living beings there are, the foremost among them is said to be the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one. So these are three different designations for the Buddha. The Tathagata means literally one who is thus come or thus gone. And there are various interpretations of this rather, let's say, enigmatic term used for the Buddha. And so I always leave it untranslated, but it suggests that the Buddha is one who has arrived at the ultimate goal, the one who has fully realized the nature of reality in all of its different facets and dimensions, and is able to teach the real nature of things and to guide others along the path to the understanding and penetration of the real nature of things. The word arahant, which is used for all of those, whether the Buddha himself or his disciples, who have eradicated the defilements of the mind, greed, hatred, delusion, and all of their offshoots, and thereby gained liberation from the cycle of samsara, the cycle of repeated birth and death. And then the Buddha, of course, is called the perfectly enlightened one, Samma Sambuddho, the one who has awakened to, fully understood, penetrated the nature of all phenomena. And so this first sentence declares that of all living beings in all the different realms of existence, from the heavenly beings, the devas, the divine beings above them, the brahmas, and then down through all human, the entire human population, the foremost of living beings is the Buddha himself. And then the text says, those who have confidence, this trust, this devotion towards the Buddha, have confidence in the foremost. And for those who have confidence in the foremost, the result is foremost. Now, this last phrase here is pointing to, let us say, the karmic consequence, the karmic benefit of placing trust, placing faith in the Buddha. Since when one has confidence in the Buddha as the foremost, then one attunes one's own mind to the qualities, the virtues of the Buddha. You could say that your own mind is vibrating in harmony with the virtues or qualities of the Buddha. It's resonating with the virtues of the Buddha. And in that way, the power of the Buddha's great compassion is sort of flowing down through your own mind, focused on the qualities of the Buddha and transforming at a very deep level the nature, or you maybe call this the vibrational level of your own mind. There is a Pali word. Actually has a long called Anubhava, which means the spiritual power. So we speak about Buddhanubhavena. We have a regular chant that we do. Bhavatu Sabha Mangalang Rakantu Sabha Devata Sabha Buddhanubhavena. That by the spiritual power of the Buddha, Sadasoti Bhavantute, may you always be safe. And so when we place this mind of trust or confidence in the Buddha, then we're able to partake of this spiritual power, the spiritual might of the Buddha, flowing down through the power of the Buddha's qualities, the qualities that make the Buddha foremost, which are basically complete purity, in the sense that he's eradicated all the defilements and the subtle traces of defilements, even the little subtlest roots of defilements have all been removed in the mind of the Buddha. And then the Buddha has the perfect wisdom that understands the nature of things and great compassion, which manifests in his activity of teaching and guiding sentient beings. And so we place confidence in the Buddha as the best or foremost of living beings. Then we come to the second and third, but two ways of representing trust, confidence in the Dharma. So to whatever extent there are things that are conditioned, and maybe I'll put in brackets here, teachings and practices. The Noble Eightfold Path, the word here is Dhamma, which here can be understood in the sense of teachings and practices. So to whatever extent there are these teachings and practices, the Noble Eightfold Path is declared the foremost among them. And again, those who have confidence in the Noble Eightfold Path have confidence in the foremost, and for them, the result is foremost. And then we have another aspect of Dhamma. So to whatever extent there are things conditioned or unconditioned. So maybe we could here render this as realities, things that exist that are real. The foremost among them is, here we have a number of synonyms which really converge on the last word in the series. The foremost among them is Nibbana, which can be understood from different angles as the uprooting of attachment, the ending of the round of repeated birth and death, the destruction of craving, dispassion, and the cessation of repeated existence. So that is Nibbana as the unconditioned or ultimate refuge. And then we have the fourth item here, which represents the third jewels, speaks about orders or groups, companies or groups. So to whatever extent there are orders or groups, different kinds of religious communities, the foremost among them is said to be the Sangha, or community of the Tathagata's disciples, the Buddha's disciples. And it's not just the ordinary disciples, but it's said to be the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. I'm not going to explain this at length, since that takes a whole lecture in itself, but it refers to those who, by following the Dharma, the Buddha's teaching, have arrived at the penetrative realization of the nature of reality. And by reaching that realization, are in the process of eradicating their defilements until we reach the last of the 8 individuals, who are the arahants, those who have succeeded in eradicating all their defilements, and thereby removing the root causes of cyclic existence and birth and death, and gaining the liberation from the round of repeated existence. And so they are said to be worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. And again, those who have confidence in the Sangha have confidence in the foremost. And for those who have confidence in the foremost, the result is foremost. Okay, so this sutta now, you could see, extols the benefits of placing trust, faith, confidence in the 3 jewels, and having devotion towards the 3 jewels. And so at the new year, we enter this new year in the hope of receiving some kind of blessing power, supporting power. And we're going to sort of channel that blessing power of the 3 jewels by going through some verses from a sutta called the Ratana Sutta. The word Ratana means jewel or gem. And so this is the discourse on jewels, or could be translated gems. And this sutta maybe is particularly appropriate at the present time when the COVID vaccine, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, because this sutta was recited by the Buddha at a time when an epidemic had broken out in the city of Vaisali. Vaisali was a city in ancient India to the north of the river Ganges. And people were dying, and all of the medicines were ineffective. And so the people of Vaisali sent some messengers to Rajagaha, where the Buddha was living, to the bamboo grove, and asked the Buddha to come to Vaisali in order to use his spiritual power to dispel that, to remove the pandemic. And so the Buddha traveled to Vaisali, accompanied by the community of monks. And when he arrived at Vaisali, then he recited the sutta to the Venerable Ananda. He told Ananda to get a bowl of water and a twig of a kind of a plant. And the Buddha recited the sutta over the bowl of water, and he asked Ananda to memorize the sutta and to travel around the city of Vaisali, to circumambulate the city, taking the water and sprinkling it throughout the city. And when Ananda did that, then it caused the pandemic to subside, or the epidemic to subside. And I'm not recommending that you recite the sutta and don't take any other precautionary measures. You should get vaccinated, you should use masks when you go out and so forth. But we can reflect on the sutta, recite it, and bring to mind the qualities of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha as a way of channeling what I would call the blessing power of the triple gem at the beginning of this year, even though it's not January 1st, but we're still in the first week of 2022. And so the sutta begins with two verses of invocation, where the Buddha asks whatever beings are gathered here, whether of the earth or in the sky. He's here not speaking to human beings, but he's addressing the supernatural, what we would call the supernatural beings, devas and spirits of various kinds. Some are dwelling close to the earth, others are dwelling in the sky. We might not be able to see them with our eyes, but the Buddha, with his special divine eye, is able to see them. He addresses them and says, "May all of you beings be happy." And then listen carefully to what I'm going to say. And then he continues with the invocation. He's still addressing the beings. He says, "Therefore, all of you listen. Show loving kindness to the human population who day and night bring you offerings." Because this is the popular practice, common practice in India. People worship many deities. And in every village, every town, there'll be shrines set up to these deities. And people will bring, on special occasions, they will bring offerings to the deities, usually little bowls of rice and other food preparations, sweets, incense, flowers, and so on. And so the Buddha is saying, since human beings bring you offerings by day, early in the morning, and in the evening, they bring you these offerings, show loving kindness to the human population and protect them. Okay, so these are two verses, have the quality of invocations. But now we come to the verses which draw upon the virtues or qualities of the three jewels. There are some verses dedicated to the Buddha, others to the Dharma, others to the Sangha. So what we're going to do is to go through each verse and go through it not like you're listening to a lecture, but as a kind of meditation. So this will be short practices of three meditation subjects that the Buddha often recommended to his disciples: Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati, Sanghanusati. The meditative recollection or contemplation of the Buddha, of the Dharma, of the Sangha. And so he begins with the verse of invoking the spiritual power of the Buddha. So it starts off, whatever treasure exists here or beyond, or the sublime gem in the heavens. I assume in Indian popular belief, one of the highest heavens that's supposed to be the most precious gem, which far surpasses all of the diamonds of the earth, sparkling, radiant, precious gem of multiple colors. So whatever treasure there is none equal to the Tathagata. So this is the sublime gem in the Buddha. By this truth, may there be safety. And so now you can take like a meditation position. If you're sitting in meditation, you can close the eyes. And then I'll just give a little sort of key to the contemplation. And then we'll pause, and in silence, you turn these themes over in your mind in order to strengthen, to arouse, to strengthen one's trust, confidence, in the Buddha and one's devotion to the Buddha. Okay, so we say the Buddha is superior to all of the gems because the Buddha has perfect purity of mind. All his defilements have been eradicated: greed, hatred, ignorance, conceit, envy, jealousy, miserliness, laziness, restlessness, all have been uprooted. So the Buddha is Suvisuddha Citta, one who is fully purified in mind. Then the Buddha is Sammasambuddho. He is the one who is perfectly enlightened, fully enlightened, the one who has understood the nature of all dharmas, of all phenomena, and the one who can teach the way to liberation flawlessly. So again, focus on the great wisdom of the Buddha as the enlightened one. And then the Buddha is one who possesses great compassion, great loving kindness and compassion. And through that compassion, he devoted himself for 45 years, always working for the benefit, welfare, and happiness of all sentient beings. So we focus on the great compassion of the Buddha, expressed through his deeds of great compassion, and his teachings, which bring the upliftment, spiritual upliftment and fulfillment of sentient beings. Okay, so now we've brought to mind the spotless purity of the Buddha's mind, his penetrating wisdom realized through his enlightenment, and his great compassion spilling out in the form of all of his teachings and activities. And so we bring all of those qualities together in this sublime gem in the Buddha. And then we can generate on this basis the wish that there will be safety, security, and well-being for ourselves, for all those who are dear and beloved to ourselves, to our relatives and friends, to our communities, whether your neighborhood or some other community to which you belong, to your country, whatever country you're living in, and to the world, to our planet Earth with all of its human population and all other living beings on the earth. May they all be safe. May they all be well and happy. So that is drawing the spiritual power of the Buddha. And now we move to the next verse. And the next two verses will draw upon the spiritual power of the Dharma. So now the verse reads that the destruction, and then I put in brackets what's meant is the destruction of defilements, this passion, the deathless, the sublime, which Shakyamuni, that's the designation for the Buddha, attained in the state of concentration. So these terms are actually references to Nibbana, the unconditioned state, that state which is unborn, unproduced, unchanging, and deathless. And that is what the Buddha realized and attained in a state of samadhi, concentration. And so there is nothing equal to that Dhamma of Nibbana, which is the removal, the complete absence of greed, hatred, and delusion, and the state that is free from the round of birth and death. And so even though we might be far from the realization of Nibbana, but we focus our mind on Nibbana as the ultimate Dhamma, and then that we take as the sublime gem in the Dhamma, that this is the state of perfect peace, bliss, freedom. And then we direct our mind, having turned the mind to these qualities of the Dhamma as Nibbana. Okay, so first we'll just briefly turn the mind to the qualities of Nibbana as a state which is, the Buddha calls it unborn. It's never come into existence, but has always been existent. It's not subject, it's undecaying. And it's the deathless state, the state that when realized confers freedom from birth and death. And so we draw upon the idea of this as the sublime gem in the Dhamma. And then on this basis, by the truth of this confidence or trust, we generate the wish, may all beings, ourselves and others, be safe, be peaceful, be happy, be fulfilled. Okay, briefly, for a minute or two, meditate on those thoughts. And if you have any relatives or friends who are ill, especially with the COVID, then you can make them the special sort of object or target of your meditation. Okay, now we come to the next verse, which is again a verse of praising the Dhamma. But this is praising the Dhamma from the aspect of the path. The previous verse praises the Dhamma from the aspect of the goal of Nibbana or liberation. But this is praising the Dhamma from the aspect of the path. And it's a little obscure, but I'll just read it and then explain. So it speaks about the purity that the Supreme Buddha praised, which they call concentration, samadhi without interval. The equal of that concentration, samadhi, does not exist. So this is the concentration of the Noble Eightfold Path, Samma Samadhi, when all of the other factors of the Eightfold Path have reached fulfillment and they all are united and brought together in that particular state of samadhi, in which the two mental factors of concentration and wisdom, samadhi and panya, are working together to eliminate, to eradicate the defilements and bring forth the ultimate fruit of the Buddhist path, the state of the liberation of the mind from all of the defilements. And so we could take this verse to be actually a way of praising the Noble Eightfold Path. And to put it sort of in the simple way, we could simply think of the 8 factors of the path that we try to implement in our life: right view, right intention or motivation, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And so let the mind dwell on that path as an integral whole, rejoicing that we are following this noble path, the path that's been followed by all of the Buddhas, the Arhats, the liberated ones of the past. And so we focus the mind on that path, particularly in its culmination in that Samma Samadhi. And then we use the mind that has been sort of lightened and calmed and focused by bringing to mind the Dhamma of the path. We suffuse that mind with loving kindness, and we generate the wish, may there be safety. Again, safety for ourselves, our loved ones, community, nation, and world. Okay, now we move to the next verse. So now we come across a series of verses praising the Sangha, the third jewel. But I've only taken a couple of those verses because there are about 5 or 6 of them. It's too much to go through each one. So this verse it has the broadest range. So this speaks about the 8 persons praised by the good who constitute four pairs. So the four pairs, there are four stages of enlightenment, we can say, four stages of world transcending liberation along the path. Each one eliminates a certain level of defilements and grants a higher degree of inner liberation. And of those four stages, each stage is divided into two phases. The phase of the path, where you are moving towards the realization of that stage, and the phase of the fruition, where you realize the fruit of that particular path. And so it's like climbing a ladder until you get to the roof. But in this case, you go two steps at a time. So when you have the four pairs and divide them up, then you get 8 persons. So these pairs are the ones at the level of the fruit are the stream enterer, who has at most 7 more rebirths, the once returner, who comes back to this world one more time, the non-returner, who doesn't come back to this world, but takes rebirth in one of the higher divine realms and gains final liberation there. And then finally, the arahant, who gains full realization, full liberation in this life itself. And since the verse has in mind a monastic setting in which the monastics are dependent upon lay people for their means of subsistence, the offerings, so it speaks about them as being the fortunate one, or the Buddha's disciples, who are worthy of offerings, and gifts that are given to them yield abundant fruit, because by reason of their purity, their wisdom, their abundant virtues, they make the offerings that are given to them a source of abundant merit, yielding such good fruits as long life, good health, strength, and wisdom. Okay, so we could bring to mind the disciples, the community of the Buddha's disciples. And if that seems too abstract, maybe you could think of the Buddha sitting in the midst of a community with monks on one side, bhikkhunis, nuns on the other side, and some upasakas, lay devotees, male lay devotees, and upasakas, female lay devotees. And see them in your mind's eye, all of them striving diligently along the path, or the arhats, those who have realized the final fruit of the path, and bring them to mind as the foremost of communities, of groups or orders. And then, having directed your trust, your faith, your devotion towards the Sangha, the noble Sangha, now by this truth, generate the wish, by this truth, may there be safety, security, and well-being for myself and all other living beings. Yeah, I'm going to skip over some verses and come to another verse on the Buddha. This is a very beautiful verse. So it says, like a woodland thicket with flowering crests in a summer month, the first month of summer. So you can imagine a thicket with flowering trees in, if you're here in the United States in the Northeast, it might be the month of June, late May or June, with all of the trees are starting to bring forth their flowers. So just so he taught the excellent Dhamma, the Dhamma that leads to Nibbana for the supreme good, the supreme welfare of living beings. So this is characterizing the Buddha not from the aspect of his own inner qualities, like the previous verse did, but in terms of his function of teaching for the welfare of living beings. So focus on the Buddha from that perspective. The one who is taught that sublime Dhamma. Again, let those thoughts of trust, confidence, devotion spread through the mind, generating clarity and joy. And then think that by this mind of confidence and by this truth, may there be safety. And maybe now we could think of all of the people who might be afflicted with the coronavirus in whatever of its variants they've contracted, especially those in hospitals and their family members, and generate the wish, may they be safe, may they be well, may they be secure. And then we come to the next verse. This will be the last verse on the three jewels. And this one is again on the Sangha, but it's focusing on the Sangha only from the aspect of the Arahats, those who are fully liberated. Again, the words need some elaboration. So they've destroyed all of their old defilements, and they no longer originate any new ones. And so their minds have become dispassionate towards any future rebirth within the cycle of samsara. And so the wise ones had said, go out like a lamp. That is, the Nibbana is depicted as the going out of the flames of greed, hatred, and delusion. So this verse is describing the fully liberated disciples of the Buddha and taking them collectively as the Sangha. We direct the mind to them, or direct the mind to the Sangha with trust, confidence, and devotion. And on that basis, we form the wish, may there be safety, may there be peace, may there be security, well-being, and happiness for all. And then we have just 3 verses that sort of repeat the basic idea. These we won't be doing as meditations. So the first goes, whatever beings are gathered here, whether of the earth or in the sky, we pay homage to the Buddha, venerated by devas and human beings. May there be safety. And then the next verse repeats the same thing, but it says, we pay homage to the Dhamma. May there be safety. And the last verse again repeats the same idea, but this time we pay homage to the Sangha, venerated by devas and human beings. May there be safety. So just for about 2 minutes, you could generate a mind of loving kindness, spreading it out over the whole earth, the whole world, formulating the wish that all beings in this world will be healthy, happy, and safe. Okay, you can relax now. We'll be ending the session. Tomorrow we will start the real retreat proper. This was just a kind of warm-up by, by invoking the blessing power of the 3 jewels. And tomorrow, starting tomorrow, we'll be having sessions on 3 themes that are appropriate, I think, for entering the new year, for meeting the new year. The 3 themes are clarity, compassion, and courage. All three start with the letter C. And so there'll be talks by myself, by Aya Dhammadippa, and by Reverend Jin Chuan and Jin Hui in California. Okay, so I think we will end today's session. And thank you all for joining, and thanks to the technical staff.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you so much.
Sadhu,
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 sadhu.
sadhu,
Thank you.
sadhu. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante.
Healthy.
Okay.
Happy New Year.
Okay. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful, Bhante.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
A beautiful way to start the new year.